Okay, so Sully's on the couch and he's ready to go, and there goes Scout, and I guess she's ready and you're ready, and here we are. Today, I want to talk with you about the Battle of Little Bighorn. Now, some of you may have already heard some of this, but I think it's important to look at it. This is a major battle in the history of the United States, and so I want to discuss that with you. Let me share my screen here for you with my mad skills. That one. Okay, click it again. All right, so we need to go back to 1868, which is when a treaty called the Treaty of Laramie was signed. This treaty was meant to take the Plains Indians and move them a little further west so that they opened up some more space in the middle of the country and so that settlers could move out there. Sorry. And start homesteading. Remember, the Homestead Acts had been passed, and so this land was available because nobody lived on it. So this was just meant to move the Native Americans a little further out. And this treaty created a very large reservation. I'll show you a map of it in just a second. And many of the Lakota Sioux, which is one particular group of Sioux Indians, I believe there were like 6. And one of them was actually the Hung Papa, which just makes me laugh. But anyway, but 2 of the main chiefs, Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, refused to sign this. They said they were not going to live on the reservation. They didn't care what anybody else thought. This was not going to be them. They were going to do what they wanted to do. This is a picture of the actual signing of the treaty. You can see the Native Americans, and you can see all of the government officials back here. They're signing the treaty. Now, this is what was called the Great Sioux Reservation. It's in this darker orange color. And you can see it goes over into Wyoming and up into Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and down even into Nebraska. This was a very large place. But see, right here in the very middle almost, there's a region called the Black Hills. Keep that in mind. It's going to be very important. It was very important to these Native Americans. This was a place they considered sacred. It had a lot of ties to their folklore and to their what they considered their identity as Sioux. And it was a very, very important area to them. Okay, so in 1874, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer was ordered to map the region of the Black Hills in South Dakota. I know you've probably heard him referred to as General Custer. He was not a general. Back during the Civil War, they did this thing called brevet. It's BREVET rank, where instead of giving somebody extra money or a medal, they would just kick their rank up a little bit for a certain period of time. And at some point, Colonel Custer had been moved up to the brevet rank of general. He was not actually a general. He was a lieutenant colonel. He was also not thought to be terribly good at tactics. He actually, I believe, finished last in his class at West Point. He was the one with the lowest average of any of the guys that were in that class. And he was sort of looked at like, this guy. But he was ordered to locate a place in the Black Hills region for a future military post or military base. He was also told to take note of any natural resources that might be there that might be useful to anybody. And on his team of people that were with him were some geologists. We know that geologists study rocks and the earth and that sort of thing. Geo means earth. And they discovered that there were deposits of gold in the Black Hills. Well, this created quite a stir and began a gold rush. Prospectors began flooding into the Black Hills area in violation of the treaty, which said that this area belonged to the Sioux. And, this was right kind of in the middle of the area that had been laid out for the Sioux. The U.S. government approached the Lakota Sioux and offered to buy the Black Hills, probably for not a whole lot of money, but the Lakota refused to sell. Remember, I told you this was a very important area to them, and they didn't want to sell it. This was meant to belong to them, and they were going to keep it. The Commissioner of Indian Affairs then ordered all the Sioux warriors to report to a reservation by January the 1st, 1836. A whole bunch of them just didn't go. So then they declared the Sioux to be hostile, even though there hadn't really been any big problems. There were probably some problems between some of the Sioux and some of the gold prospectors, but there hadn't been wholesale rioting or marauding or anything at this point. But General Sheridan, this guy here, declared the Sioux to be hostile and decided to go at this in a military fashion. So in March of 1876, he brought in 3 different groups of army, and the pictures are listed the same way that the names are listed. So here we go. Colonel John Gibbon left Fort Ellis in Bozeman, Montana, with 450 cavalry and infantry troops. Now remember, cavalry are the ones that are on horseback, and the infantry are the ones that are walking. General George Crook left Fort Fetterman in Wyoming with 1,000 cavalry and infantry troops. And the one that's going to concern us the most in this particular story is General Alfred Terry, and he left Fort Abraham Lincoln in the Dakota Territories with 879 cavalry and infantry troops. And this included the 7th Cavalry, who were under the control of Colonel George Custer. The soldiers expected that somewhere they would encounter between 800 and 1,500 Native American warriors, and they believed that any of these 3 groups would be able to deal with that many warriors by themselves. They were not going out looking to start a big fight. They were just going out to see where the Native Americans were and see if they couldn't get them to go back where they were supposed to. They were not at this point looking to start a big fight and wipe them out. The tribes had gathered. The Lakota Sioux, the Northern Cheyenne, and the Arapaho tribes had gathered for their annual Sundance ceremony. And during that ceremony, Sitting Bull, and this is a picture of Sitting Bull, had a dream of soldiers falling in great numbers into the camp and predicted that there would be a great victory for the Sioux very soon in the future. The 7th Cavalry, on June the 22nd, of 1876, General Terry had sent Custer and the 7th Cavalry. They had located a village, and he sent the 7th Cavalry to approach the village from the south. Now see, this is where the village is. Hi, Scout, don't help. Okay, back up, go right over there. Thank you. This is the village here, and it's a huge village because it's these 3 groups of Native Americans. And in fact, the Native Americans had said, one of the chiefs, I think they said his name was Old Dog, which was sort of a sad name, but had said that he didn't expect any problems. They knew the soldiers were out there, but they didn't really expect any problems because there were so many of the Native Americans. They figured that the soldiers would just ride by and leave them alone. Custer was sent out to go circle around to the south to keep the Sioux and the Cheyenne from escaping to the south. They were going to pin them in, and they were going to deal with them right here. On June the 25th, Custer took a position about 12 miles away from the village. And they still have no idea how big this village is. They're still expecting just the Sioux, and they still have no idea how big this village is. Village contained about 8,000 people based on the best guess that we have. And anywhere from 1,500 to 1,800 of those people were warriors, which is way on the high end of what these soldiers thought they could handle. Custer planned to attack on June the 26th, but his scouts reported that the Sioux had already noticed that the soldiers were near, and they were probably getting ready to move. Now, these are Plains Indians. They didn't build permanent homes. They were nomadic. They moved. They would move their village to one place and stay for a few weeks and hunt, let their horses graze. And when the grass was used up and the game was hunted out, they would move on to somewhere else. And they were nomadic. They followed the buffalo generally. And so they could pick up and move at any point. Custer ordered Captain Frederick Benteen, who's this guy here on the top, and his 125 men to march southwest. And Major Marcus Reno, this dude here, and his 140 men were to stay with Custer and continue the advance. So they had split their forces even further now. So they come to the Little Bighorn River. That's where they get the name for the battle. It's at the Little Bighorn River. And Custer orders Major Reno to take his men and cross the river and continue advancing. He stays with his men and continues on. Reno was now within about 2 miles of the village, so he's getting pretty close. The warriors now get concerned about the fact that they're getting this close to them, so they attack his troops. Reno, for what seems to me an inexplicable reason, orders his men to dismount and form a scrimmage line. That means that they got off their horses and formed a line where they would shoot from. The line broke because here come all of these Native American warriors on horseback still. They didn't ever get off to fight. They fought on horseback. And so the line broke and they retreated, and the mounted warriors continued to attack and killed many of them. They just rode through there and just killed them as they rode through. It'd circle back around, ride through again. They compared it to hunting buffalo at that point because these guys are off their horses and they're way less maneuverable. Captain Benteen had marched where he was supposed to go, and he and his men had found no sign of the village. They were going in a different direction. So they had stopped and were debating what they were going to do next when they received a message that Custer had sent that said that he was under attack and Benteen should return quickly. Now, this is a copy of the note that was written. Custer originally gave the message to a soldier who had a very thick Italian accent. And one of the other officers was concerned that he wouldn't be able to make himself understood because he was upset and agitated, and his accent was very thick. And so he stopped and wrote this note out, and that's why it's signed W.W. Cook and not Custer, because Cook was the one that wrote the message out. But the message was from Custer, and it says, "Came on a big village. Be quick, bring packs. P.S. Bring packs." That means ammunition is what they're talking about, ammunition packs. Bring as much ammunition as you have because there's a whole bunch of warriors here. So Captain Benteen's group turned and was moving quickly and came up with Major Reno's group who were retreating. They joined in that group, and then both of the groups began to search for Custer. In the meantime, Custer and his 210 men had gotten very close to the main village and were attacked by the main body of warriors. This is where the most intense fighting is. The soldiers were very quickly overwhelmed and fell back. Companies were split and they perished separately. So all of the different companies of Custer's group were captured, encircled, and killed. Custer made his last stand, as it's called, on a little hill. He and 40 to 50 soldiers were cornered on top of a small hill. They were surrounded by hundreds of Lakota warriors, and all of those soldiers were killed. Every man that was with Custer was wiped out. Benteen's group survived, mostly intact. Some of Reno's men survived. Nobody that was with Custer survived. We don't actually have any accounts of what happened to Custer's men from Custer's men because they were fighting at the time. Nobody took the time to write anything down because they didn't have that kind of time. They have some accounts from the Native Americans who were there of what happened, And there's archaeological evidence. They have gone through and studied where the bodies were found. Where do they find lots of shells? Where do they find various things? They've studied that, and that's how they kind of piece together what happened. Custer's defeat became sort of a rallying cry for the U.S. Army, kind of like Remember the Alamo was for the Texans. They continued to pursue the Sioux and the Lakota and the Cheyenne as well. But most of the Plains Indians who were declared hostile had surrendered within a year of the fight. Apparently, the next winter, that winter that came up was a very harsh winter, and they had very little food. The Native Americans had very little food during that winter. And so by spring, most of them were ready to come in and, give up wandering and at least get fed. The U.S. government took control of the Black Hills region, and they never gave any compensation or any payment to the Sioux Nation. They just took the land back, which is typically what happened anytime there was a treaty. It generally wasn't the Native Americans that broke the treaty. It was generally the American government and the American settlers who broke the treaties. There was one survivor of Custer's last stand, but it was not a human. Comanche was a buckskin gelding. Now, buckskin means that it's this color here. It's this kind of brown color with a darker mane and tail, usually. He was ridden by a Captain Miles Keogh. It's believed that he wasn't taken because most of the other horses that survived were taken by the Native Americans, but Comanche had suffered 7 gunshot wounds. He was still standing when the next group of soldiers came in and found what had happened. He was standing over the body of Captain Keogh. He was the guy that was in charge of taking care of the horses looked him over and said that he thought that he could be nursed back to health and he should be able to survive. So he was transported to Fort Meade, and it was directed that he receive the best care possible as he was a hero horse, and he would not be ridden or do any type of work after that day. But he was brought out anytime they had a parade, and he would lead the parades. They would lead him, and he would lead the parades. He died December 7th of 1891. They believe he was 29 years old when he died. His body was sent to the University of Kansas to be preserved. So he was taxidermied. He was stuffed like you would do a mount of a deer head or a bird that you have shot somewhere. And he is still on display at the university's Natural History Museum. So that's Comanche, the only survivor of Custer's last stand. Sitting Bull fled to Canada, but he returned to the U.S. after 4 years. He was sent to the Standing Rock Reservation in South Dakota, but Indian police began to worry about his influence over this movement that started called the Ghost Dance movement, which was kind of began to look like it was going to lead to an enormous attack of the Sioux coming off of the reservation and attacking everybody they could find. And so they wanted to kind of to put that down so that didn't happen. And Sitting Bull was one of the main leaders of this movement. So he was arrested by the Indian police in 1890 as they were bringing him out of his cabin. They were surrounded by other Native Americans, one of whom shot at the soldiers. So the soldiers just turned and killed Sitting Bull right there. They just shot him right in the chest. And he was buried at Fort Yates. Crazy Horse, after Little Bighorn, he continued to harass the miners and the prospectors that were in the Black Hills region. But after that very harsh winter that I talked about, he agreed to surrender. But when he was coming in to surrender, the soldiers attacked and killed his men. This is very close still in time to the Little Bighorn, and I guess they were still pretty put out about the whole thing, the soldiers. And so they just attacked and killed his men. They didn't kill Crazy Horse. He escaped. The next day he asked to speak with the military commander, but the soldiers that he approached to speak with attempted to arrest him. He fought, and he was stabbed in the abdomen with a bayonet, and he died the next day. He was buried near Wounded Knee Creek. Now, we'll talk about the Battle of Wounded Knee, which happened a little bit after Sitting Bull was killed, and is another very important, I wouldn't say battle, but we'll talk about that in another time. Today, there is a Crazy Horse Memorial that's being built in the Black Hills. It's on privately owned land in Custer County, South Dakota. It's not really too far from Mount Rushmore, I understand. The sculptor, and this name is going to just kill me, Korzak Zielkowski. And he began carving the mountain in 1948, and it's still nowhere close to being finished. You can see that if you go there, see, here's the face. That's what they've got carved right now, and they're still working on it. And here's what they want it to end up being. See, here the horse is going to be here, and this is going to be his arm, and this is going to be his body here, and then more of the horse down here. When they finish this, it's going to be amazing. It is still, you can go and look at it now, but it's not anywhere close to being finished. All right. That's all I have for you today. I hope that this has answered any questions you might have about this particular incident. If you had a good time with this, please like and subscribe and share and whatever. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you have any ideas of something you'd like me to talk about later, please leave that in the comments as well. Other than that, thanks for being here. I'll see you the next time. Okay, Sully, I think we're done.